Oh, I meant, yeah. Ooh.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Coulter, your town manager. And with us, we've got Keith Natasha, our water and sewer director. And of course, everybody knows Trish Roughshire, our IT director, who's running the film for us. This evening, we're going to talk about the water and sewer. And I want to start off with some brief history. About a year ago, we recognized that we had a very serious problem 2.5 years ago, a very serious problem with our infrastructure and with our pricing system. And the board, this Board of Selectmen, the Select Board, courageously decided to address both of those challenges. The infrastructure problem resulted from some of our water lines and some of our sewer lines that were now over 100 years old. The water lines were leaking, and the water was infiltrating, the groundwater was infiltrating into those water lines, which ended up being disposal that we had to pay for. So it was a problem that got worse every day. And the other concern we had was that if a water line broke in the center of town, and those lines were over 100 years old, that it would shut down commerce in the center of town for an awful long time, and those breaks are not covered by insurance. So it could be a multi-million-dollar fix or repair, not to mention a bunch of businesses being shut down for a long period of time and citizens who live on that water line not having water service. Having brought this problem to the attention of the Select Board, they decided as a matter of policy that we have to start making these investments. And we know that some of the investments we make, like schools and fire departments and so forth, are very appealing. They're very exciting. We don't get as excited with underground infrastructure problems until they're broken. Then we get very excited. So through our former manager, Phil's, from his leadership, and now with Keith's leadership as the head of the department, we've had we're about to enter our third year of major underground infrastructure improvements, which really minimizes our risk significantly. I'm also happy to say that those projects are coordinated very carefully with our road surfacing plan. So Keith decides first what we need to do in terms of infrastructure, where our greatest risk is. He collaborates with Paul Jaffoon to decide which of those subsurface infrastructure problems are beneath streets that are on his replacement plan, and then they work out where the top priorities are, and that becomes the plan for the following spring. So we're in a groove, we're making progress. After Keith shows you some great pictures, and I hope you can see them at home, we're going to talk a bit about our financial strategic plan. By way of example, we spend about $400,000 a year in I&I, which is the water infiltration that goes into our water lines from cracks in those water lines, sewer lines. Thank you, Keith. And we end up having to just pay for that as disposal. So the groundwater finds its way into the sewer line because it's cracked. Keith is going to talk about this. And we spend $400,000 a year. We've been paying for it with an article at town meeting, which is usually paid for through debt. Our goal a year ago when we redid the pricing was to build some retained earnings so that we could pay for these things without borrowing any money. And you're going to see in this plan this evening that that's beginning to happen. We've built up the retained earnings account. We've got money in the bank. We don't need to increase pricing. I know some people will now shut the TV off because that's what they wanted to know. There's no increase in water or sewer pricing for the next year. Tonight is simply fulfilling a commitment I made a year ago when folks generously increased the price of water and sewer very significantly, to come back and report in a year as to where we are. The State of the Union for water and sewer is very strong. The infrastructure is getting better. The retained earning accounts is growing. We've got a stable staff. It's the same number of employees that we've had for 3 years. So although volume is growing, we're doing more with less every single day. as we are with other departments. And that, to me, is very exciting. It shows the plan is working. So with that, I'll go through the numbers in a few minutes, but I'm going to ask Keith to bring you through a kind of a photo tour that will really help you understand what the water and the sewer department do. So with that, I'll turn it over to Keith. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Tom. Hey, my name is Keith Nastasia, Water and Sewer Superintendent. I'm going to start us off with some sewer pictures here. First picture we have here, this is a sewer main, and you see there's a lot of cracking on the top, and that's where there's a lot of infiltration. That's groundwater that effectively gets into the sewer main, goes through the MWRA meter, and the town actually gets charged for that. So that's why the assessment is a lot higher than the actual usage of water versus what actually MWRA receives from the town. So with this, just showing you the dilapidated pipe here. And this right here, this is what's called cured in place pipe. It's the same sewer main, but now they clean it and they put a sock in there and they fill it with air and concrete, and it solidifies, so it looks like a brand new main. So it's trenchless, so it's very little construction. We'll say deviances in the roads, no dig ups. Well, not dig ups on when there's a point repair where it's impossible to sleeve it. So this right here is the most effective way and the least disruptive to the residents and the business owners. Right here, this is another one that's showing a lot of this infiltration coming in on the side of the pipe. This pipe was cleaned and then relined, and that's what it looks. It looks essentially like a brand new pipe. This right here, this is a major one. It's a leak that's on connection, and that's all groundwater that's coming into this pipe that eventually goes through the MWRA meter, and the town gets assessed for it. And that's what it looks like after it's been cleaned and lined. This right here, this is a sewer manhole. The bottom, if you notice the bottom right below the ladder, it's all, the bottom, the floor is almost basically just, it's all degraded and falling apart. It's all groundwater coming in there. This right here is after it's been cleaned, and it's kind of like a whip that all it is like cake batter that you put on. It's all cementous lining that goes around the whole entire structure. So now it is completely sealed, so there's no more groundwater coming into that manhole. And this right here, this is just to show you some other improvements we're doing within the sewer system. This is one of our sewer pump stations. This was at the beginning of the summer, and this is what it looks like now. We paved the outside totally, we just painted the whole structure, cleaned it, did a lot of maintenance to the pumps, motors, transducers, and whatnot internally in there. This is a brand new pump station that was done on Royal Road. And this is the inside of it, just showing how what all the components are that are inside it. This is all the pumps and the valves. This is showing what it looks like for a brand new sewer pump station. Oh, okay, now we're going to get into, next one's some water slides. Do you want me to continue on with water?
Please do.
Okay. All right, this, just going to dab in a little bit into the water system. The town has been aggressively flushing our mains, which basically removes a lot of the debris, because if you don't, you're going to get dirty water like this. Anytime there's any kind of disruption, increase and decrease in pressure, which is called water hammering, and it just causes a lot of disruption to all the residents and the business owners. So this is what we do when we flush. That's what it comes out, and after you flush for a little bit, it pulls all the debris out of the mains, and we do unidirectional, so it's not just pulling water from anywhere. We segregate into neighborhoods, so we're pulling all the debris and removing it, blowing it out of the pipes, and it comes out clean just like this. So just showing with all the water main improvements we've been doing. We've had a lot of pictures with contractors. I didn't want to have contractors, and they wanted my own personnel, but this is one photo we have of some water main work that's being done. Did a little bit over a mile this year's Phase 5 water main improvements. And that's it for some technical slides for you.
That's it. Thank you, Keith. A key point to to make about the water, sewer, and DPW departments. I guess the key word would be coordination and collaboration. Years back, there was a water department, there was a sewer department, and there was a DPW department. Never shall they meet, never shall they talk, never shall they share common used equipment. Everybody had their own equipment. That's what we sold at auction a year ago. Everybody had their own staffs. Some days water was busy, sewer was slow. Some days sewer was busy, water was slow, but they didn't use common assets. They stayed in their lane. In the last 3 years, the amount of work we're doing is up by more than 50%. Asset utilization is at 100% because we're not buying a lot of new equipment. We're sharing equipment. You saw a slide there where there was paving. 3 years ago, those pump stations would have been paved by an outside general contractor. Now we can pave those small roads or those pathways with our own resources. And so that's why our retained earnings is growing at such a significant rate, which is going to lead to more cash purchases on capital projects and less debt at higher rates. You know, it's interesting. This is a side note. This is a side note that's important. It has nothing to do with anything other than debt. We're having a debate right now in town that should the school project pass, should it be funded with inside the levy or through a debt exclusion, right? That's the discussion. We will have about $5 million in free cash. If we use that free cash to cover the debt expense inside the budget, then we have to borrow money for all of our capital projects. The borrowed money for the capital projects and capital equipment is at a much higher rate than the money we can borrow for long-term debt of a building. So that's a discussion we'll have in the future. But when we talk about debt management, Biz will talk about it at the Finance Committee and in front of town meeting. It's not, you don't eliminate the need for capital equipment. It's, are you going to pay cash? Are you going to pay for it with a low interest rate, or are you going to pay for it with a high interest rate? And so that's the kind of dance we have to do all the time. The next point I want to make is construction coordination. I made it earlier. Keith and Paul have done a terrific job at coordinating their resources. So what does that mean? Even though our work is up significantly of paving, of new stations, of maintenance and repair, we haven't increased the workforce in 3 years by one person. The same amount of people. It's just that we're sharing assets instead of hiding in each other's silos. So I'd like to bring you to the numbers. Chet and Cynthia, do you have this chart here? So I just want to point out a couple of things. Is there any way to blow that up for the public, Trish? So we're going to do sewer first. So folks, what you see there, and I'm sure we'll get there eventually, on the sewer line you see 4 quarters. And you see fiscal years from left to right, from fiscal 20 to fiscal 24. And then you see a current projection, a current 6-month run rate for fiscal 25. Thank you, Trish. And then a projection in the underneath that for the rest of the year. So what I want to walk you through is I'd like you to take notice of the trend on the sewer line going up. 1.6, 1.8, 2.2, and then there was a dip for whatever reason in 23, and it could have been an accounting issue, quite frankly, because we've found a bunch of them, and then 24. But now as we're in 25, we're at $2.2 million through 6 months. So we are on a run rate, if that's half a year, of $4.4 million. $4.5 million for 6 months. So we're on a run rate of $8.9 million. So the sewer number is growing. And that's from real and projected growth over the last several years. The goal is, the first policy change is that in the next town meeting next spring, as town meeting members, you both have had to vote on I&I every year, right? And it's borrowed money. Our recommendation this year is going to be to pay for it from retained earnings. Money we've earned, money we've saved, money we'll invest, as opposed to borrowing for I&I. The pictures you just saw show the benefit of I&I. And by the return on investment is pretty significant because we get a rebate of what percent?
Excuse me. So it goes back to the total assessment to MWRA.
Right.
If we don't invest in our infrastructure, and we'll be paying for all this infiltration, which obviously is the fees will be higher because we're sending more our own wastewater, but we're also sending groundwater. So essentially
I could be mistaken, but don't we get some sort of MWRA grant for the I&I?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, every year we get $1 million, $1,060,000 from the MWRA in a grant loan, 75% grant, 25% loan, zero.
I&I.
Correct. Yes.
So the wonderful part of this is by saving money, we don't have to borrow money because the reimbursement comes much later on. So if you look down, our run rate on revenue is going up. If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, Keith is projecting $649,000 in retained earnings. Cynthia, question. Do you have a mic? Yes.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I was going to wait till the end because I have some questions, but on I&I, I understood there's an I&I fund that anybody who brings a new project to Stoughton has to pay into. So not all of the money, I understand about the grant, but even the 25%, part of that is paid by these new businesses.
Subsidized by the new businesses. That's correct.
Oh, I misunderstood. I thought the idea was that it was coming from the general fund.
The surplus money from the revenue and less the expenses for an enterprise fund is called retained earnings, as you know.
Yes.
What we're saying from a global perspective, whether it's for I&I, whether it's for a pressure a line cleaner with high pressure water, which I think was $400,000, our goal is to not borrow money. That's the bigger message there. I&I is a little more complicated, and I don't pretend to have all the facts, but we get a no-interest loan and a grant from MWRA, and we get investments into the fund from new businesses who pay into the fund. So there are lots of sources. Maybe using I&I is a bad example, but if we buy, what's the jet truck cost?
It was at $350,000.
So we bought a jet truck for $350,000. We borrowed money for that.
Well, I
Retained earnings are
understand.
going to be able to pay for it.
I've only been, doing this for a couple of decades.
A long time.
The understanding was that it's an annual appropriation, but then we get the grant.
Yep.
So even though it might say on the warrant 400,000,
Right.
it's actually comes down to 100,000, and then that may be from retained earnings or it may be from the I&I fund. I'm not an expert. We had an expert on I&I, Roberta Camacho, but she moved to Florida, so if they've got I&I down there, she's an expert on Florida. But so I'm only her very pale substitute.
Well, you said it better than I did, Cynthia. The key theme, and I know it's important that Chet is a FinCom member, is we're on board with the townwide policy to reduce debt. We've got too much debt, or certainly we will if the projects on the table now go through. We'll be fairly close to our debt limit, and so one of the things I noticed when I arrived here 2 years ago is there didn't seem to be a clear understanding of our limitations. We understand that now. That's why we could not run these businesses any longer at a structural deficit, because we were running it at a loss. And these businesses as enterprise funds should be paying for their capital investments from their retained earnings. What I'm happy to report is we're now in that position. These businesses can pay for a substantial portion of their capital investments through their retained earnings. The next chart is the Water Department year in review. Once again, it goes from 2020 through year-end '24 and half a year for 2025. And you'll see for 6 months, we've made approximately $3 million in revenue. And so for the year, we're projecting that to be $6 million in revenue. If you look at the trend from 2020, the total water pumped, the total water revenue was 4.6 million, 4.9 million, 4.9, 4.6, 5.5, and now we're projecting $6 million. That has happened for a couple of reasons. Our town, and really through the leadership of this select board, has had great success in bringing in new businesses, and we have a fixed infrastructure. So the more water we run through that infrastructure, the more money we make. It's a fixed infrastructure. So if you sell 2 widgets with your infrastructure, you make X. If you sell 22 widgets with the same infrastructure without any expense, then you're going to make 20X. And that's what happens in this. It's a business that scales very well. The more water we sell, the more water we make, money we make. Now, the problem we've got for years was the meter program. The meter programs were archaic. They often broke down. People would go weeks or months, and the meter wouldn't move at all. You had to go there and physically read them, which was labor intensive and not always very accurate. If a homeowner had a massive leak, like the hearing we had last week, and have a $14,000 water bill, it's because a toilet was running for several straight months, and it was going directly from the water line through the meter right into the sewer system. So we were paying for that, and the homeowner was paying for the water, and we were paying for the disposal of that. Now we have what's called a Neptune meter system. Are we about halfway?
A little bit more than half.
A little more than halfway in metering the whole town. We paid for this metering system not through debt, but through a borrowing. Yes, it was a borrowing then, pardon me. And now what happens is we can track it from our office. So if somebody has that same leak, we can call them on the phone and tell them within an hour, you've got a leak, and it's likely at the flow rate, it's likely from your toilet or from an underground line. Have you done any construction? And we can fix it. But the new revenue is from the new growth, and it's from us capturing an accurate value for the consumption that we're using in the town. And so it's a great investment. It's working. Nobody is skating. But if people skate and aren't paying their water bill because the meter doesn't work, that means other people are paying more because they have to cover that volume. So this will be another 6 to 8 months before we're done, and we'll be entering the state-of-the-art in terms of technology. I'd like Keith to talk a little bit on the upper right-hand corner about these 4 or 5 or 6 major projects that are underway right now that total about $15 million. Keith?
Yep. Okay. The first one, which is related to, was the meter replacement program. That the town had done all the commercial meters a few years ago, and they implemented phase 1 of the residential, and now we're on the last phase of the residential metering. There's
Keith,
roughly
can I interrupt you for a minute? Sure. Only because you weren't here. It just came to me. We paid for the meter program through the MWRA fund. That was the remaining money in the fund.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't have to borrow any money for the, it didn't go to town meeting. We didn't have to borrow any money.
Yeah,
I just wanted the residents
the
to
water
know.
side on MWRA.
Thank you.
Thank you. To reference back to, we finished phase 1 of the residential water meter replacement program. Now we're into the second phase, which is the final phase. There's roughly, there was 4,000 additional meters to do, and we have roughly 1,950 left to go. So it's probably 6 to 8 months for completion. And with that, like as the town manager referenced, it's very technological. It's user-friendly for the resident. That the town can notify a resident if there's a continuous leak. So instead of not knowing, the town is alerted every day on when there's continued consumption or high usage that's an anomaly on a residence or even a commercial property. The next one is the water main improvements. That right there, that's improving our infrastructure. People want to come to towns that have good infrastructure and good schools, and this is part of the infrastructure. This infrastructure and roads and schools, which is a huge attraction in Stoughton, and we have a lot of new growth, and the growth is going to continue here. With the water main improvements, it's, we're increasing capacity, which increases pressure for all the residents as well. Next, we're going to get into the regulatory compliance stuff, which is PFAS, which every community has to deal with now throughout the country. The Muddy Pond PFAS upgrade, that's, a little bit over $3.7 million. It's just a new filtration silo that's going into the building. Then in addition to that one, Pratt's Court PFAS upgrade, same thing. It's an addition being put on to the Pratt's Court. We're removing one of the green sand filters and putting it in the PFAS activated charcoal. And then the Goddard, that'll be the last of the stations that needs a PFAS upgrade. And this right here is just the design, the $300,000 that's going to be for the next year's capital request, because we won't be ready to do the construction till we get the other two, Muddy Pond and Pratt's Court, those completed.
Now, there was a policy decision made, strike that. I should restate it. The water commissioners, who are your select board, will make the decision on rates. Our recommendation to the select board is we not touch the rates in the water department. But you will note on the bottom that our revenues will be almost equal to our expenses. So although there'll be no structural deficit for this particular year in the water department, we won't be putting away $650,000 like we are in the sewer department, but there'll be no structural deficit either.
Correct.
And we do have retained earnings built up in the water department, so we'll be able to invest in capital without a lot of borrowing for the smaller investments.
Correct.
For the larger investments, it'll be a combination of state grants, federal grants, and town funding. The next thing I wanted to mention is that these projects for PFAS are regulated by the federal government. Mm-hmm. I want Keith to talk a little bit. I know the people in the audience know exactly what PFAS is because you've been at all the town meetings. But I'd like you to explain to the residents who will be watching this on SMAC, what exactly is, two-part question, what exactly is it that PFAS is that the federal government is making you treat to that level? And the next question is a political question. The president-elect has promised to do away with all EPA regulations. What are the chances that these regulations for PFAS are going to be reversed?
Thank you for those loaded questions. Well, yeah, the PFAS, perfurichloro, I can't even say the rest of the words, but essentially it's particles relative to plastics that are in the groundwater, which basically infiltrates into, we're a groundwater system. But it gets into groundwater systems and as well as surface waters, which is reservoirs. It's just things that migrate through the ground. It's a contaminant. Before it was ignored. Now the regulators have decided to put mandate limits on it. It started off at 70 parts per trillion. Everything else that is levels on it is parts per billion. They went to the next level, parts per trillion, which is so microscopic, but it is it's another thing that's hazardous to people's health. But it's in Bounty, it's in firefighting material, it's in your clothing, it's in your pans. It's unfortunately it's in cups, anything plastic it's in. But it's really made an impact to the regulators and to start offsetting it with drinking water. So with the regulators, that they had it at 70 parts per trillion, they reduced it down to 20, and now they just most recently lowered it down to 4. So every community has to get their PFAS levels to below, 4 or below, which it's a very tough number to get to. So that's why all these upgrades need to be done at these treatment facilities, so we can reduce our levels down. And we have 4 years to get this work done.
for some perspective, I heard an analogy several months ago that 4 parts per trillion is equal to a toenail of a mosquito. You can't even see it. That's how small it is. But it is a hazard. Firemen have been affected significantly because it's a chemical that's most present in firefighting foam for putting fires out. And that's one of the reasons the Massachusetts legislature just passed a law to give special coverage and protections and reimbursement for young firefighters who come down with cancer that they've now tied to PFAS. What do you think about the president-elect and these regulations from EPA?
And now with the regulations, the regulatory authority, and if if the president-elect removes these things, it's a tough one to try and forecast on, because financially, yes, it is. It's disruptive to every community out there that has to deal with it, unless they're a 100% MWRA community, which MWRA has to do it, which that cost gets passed on to the end user anyhow. It's going to be a very tough political fight on if these regulations are removed, because I think the whole country is already prepared to offset the the lower levels that they want every community or every public water supplier to be at. I mean, financially, I wish they would do away with it, because I don't want to be candid about it. We've been drinking it for all our entire lives, but the regulators have mandated things, and we have to comply with them. So, if the president-elect does remove it, could be a cost savings eventually for all communities.
Thank you, Keith. Chet, Cynthia, do you have any questions before I see if there's anybody online? Cynthia.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. First, on your slide presentation, when you repair or refresh whatever you do to the sewer lines, aren't you decreasing their capacity?
Good question.
No, we're not decreasing the capacity on the sewer lines at all. Actually, it's clean. It's the same exact pipe. So if it's an 8-inch, that's you see that's degraded. It is less than a 1/4 inch of a concrete liner that's going in there, because that pipe has been over years has lost its inner lining anyhow. So yeah, so just say if it was an 8-inch in a diameter, it actually probably increased to 8 1/8 and a 1/4. It would bring it back to its original strength of 8-inch in a diameter.
The pump station that you showed that you painted,
Yes.
I couldn't tell. Did you paint it green or gray?
I'm sorry, it's green.
Well, and my comment is I like that. It kind of blends in a little more with the background, with the trees and things, instead of being stark white and so obvious.
That's exactly what we were going with, is to try and make it blend.
And then on the water, I've seen a lot of water on my travels. I have seen a lot of water line replacement off of Central Street, I think, toward Sharon and Canton. And that's a good thing, because as you pointed out, many of these water lines, especially in my neck of the woods, are like 100, 150 years old. I think I went by a water leak just recently because there was water going down the gutter. So the more of this repair or replace we do, the better. And my last comment, I recently had my meter replaced, my water meter. And I have to commend you on your selection of a vendor. They said they would call, they come between, I think it was 1 and 3. He called at 1:30 to say he was on his way. I asked to be alerted because of my disability. It's difficult for me to get to the door without some advance warning. So he told me he'd be arriving within the half hour, and he did. It took a little longer to replace my meter because I live in a 300-year-old house with a a cellar with a dirt cellar. I mean, it's a real cellar. He had a very pleasant attitude because I don't go into my cellar, and he had to do battle with a broom against all of the spider webs. But he kept a good attitude. It took him about an hour. But my comment about it is, was it unusual that after my meter was replaced, my water was discolored? Is that common, or was that just me?
Normally, when they're just replacing a meter, because they're shutting it off in the street, there's not much. The only volume loss is that 8.5-inch meter piece. So there shouldn't have been. Are you near where there's any construction, water lines being done, water mains, being replaced? Because that could be a disruption. We've also had a few water main breaks too, which steers things up. Like I said, you get some hammering.
What I'm saying is, if it was just my freaky house, fine. But if this is a fairly common occurrence, perhaps some information on a postcard that could be left in the person's door, so that they are handed to them when the installer comes, so that folks can be aware before they, wash their whites, that the water could potentially be discolored. If it was just me, fine. But if it's going to be something that happens to other people's homes, some sort of alert for them, so that they'll know that run the water for a couple of minutes, and then you can wash and you can boil up potatoes or whatever.
Right. Sure thing. Thank you.
Chet? Good to see you, sir.
Great to be here. Great to be here. Jack Collins, 30 Barnes Road, Precinct 1. Welcome, Keith. I didn't realize that we had a new water superintendent, sewer superintendent, but welcome aboard. I have a few questions on sewer and also water. My first question is, I know DPW has a camera and a jet truck that we just discussed. Is that helping with I&I, or is that just to check and see if is that just for water or for sewage?
No, the camera and jet truck is for sewer only.
Okay.
You can't cross-contaminate. And plus, the water mains are under pressure, where a sewer line is just gravity. The only thing that's under pressure on a sewer line is a force main, which I think goes to a pump station in gravity. Then it's through the pumps pushed out to a higher level where it hits the gravity system to eventually get to MWRA. But so the camera / jet truck is used only in the sewer, or it'd be used in drains, helping out highway certain situations.
Okay, very good, thank you. And staying with that same idea, do they give a report to the company that actually does the lining, or do they have to go in and inspect with their cameras and find out where the cracks are and then double charge us, is what I'm asking.
Yeah.
If we do the work first, do they still charge us for camera work and things like that, or do they just charge us for the lining of the pipes?
Yeah. How the program's set up first is through one of the engineering vendors. That the engineering vendor that we use goes out to certain areas, and they will, they contract out with a camera to identify where there's some major leaks out. We do, it's called sub-basins. We have 15 sub-basins. We do sewer areas throughout the town, but then there's other areas that the town, we coordinate with the engineering company that, okay, these smaller side streets, instead of us paying them, we do it ourselves. We go out, we will jet it, and we camera it, and we provide them with the footage. So then the contract, the vendor that does, the cured in place lining, they use our information. So we're doing some of the work ourselves to reduce the costs.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you. My second part is I&I. How many miles do we normally do a year for camera work, lining, things like that? Because, I mean, if we're getting $1 million in grant, then we're spending $400,000 a year. I mean, I think that we've been doing it for numerous years. I think that we should be pretty much close to doing the whole town.
Yeah, unfortunately, I&I is just the gift that just keeps on giving. We could do the whole town. Things are going to keep happening. I mean, there's breaks, there's bursts. New growth is also has impacts on things. But there is almost 100 miles of sewer main. There's 150 miles of water main. Like there's still a lot of part of the town that's still septic tanks.
Right.
So just say 100 miles. 100 miles. I mean, we might have cambered 100 miles, but we have not rehabbed 100 miles.
Okay, so fair to say maybe 20, 25 miles a year?
Rehabbing.
Lining, yeah.
Oh no, gosh, no.
More?
You might investigate camera 10 miles, maybe 12.
Okay.
And then cured in place like these total rehabs, you're not even getting a half a mile a year. Because it's expensive. But it's not just this. They also will rebuild structures. You'll have a leaky manhole cover because the bricks, the chimney wall has let go, so it's rebuilding that, or it's been a total rehab of a manhole. Mm-hmm. So it's all the I&I work. It's not just in the mains; it's also the structures. I mean, just a sewer cover that has holes in it. That's an I&I. When a road floods, all that water just goes right through the two holes. So we're going around plugging those as well.
And also people that have their washing machines hooked up to downspouts, hooked up to the sewer at all costs. I understand
Unfortunately, the biggest thing, the biggest problem we have in town, aside from the leaky pipes, is people that have sump pumps, dry wells, or washing machines, just like you referenced.
I forgot to mention sump pumps. Sorry.
that go into the sewer system.
Okay, so one of the most important things I like to ask, this was brought up at the select board meeting. One of the select board members asked about renegotiating our contract with MWRA. My understanding is that we're charged for household number of people that we have in town, and that's been that way for a long time. I don't know if we can maybe do something to renegotiate with the MWRA to lower our sewer cost, other than what we're doing with I&I and trying to educate homeowners not to do sump pumps and wash machines and down leaders into the sewer pipe. And maybe cover up the water sewer holes in the manhole covers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, how the formula that MWRA does, it's an assessment that, they have outfall meters, flow meters for the sewer system. They do it in every MWRA community. It's not that they'll just say Stoughton has 28,000, City of Boston has 610,000. Population plays into it, but they go by the flow meters, that what is actually leaving the towns. And then it's the total volume. Deer Island takes over 350 million gallons of raw sewage every day.
Keith, let me interrupt you for a minute because I know what Chet's talking about. I heard that the other night, and it's in my notes. And I'll when I can, I'll confer with you on what the notes. What Scott was saying is that in addition to the formula, we pay a surcharge that has something to do, he said, with the poverty level.
Exactly.
That it shouldn't apply to us, and that for years we've made MWRA aware that it doesn't apply to us, but they continue to assess us with that surcharge. So I took note of that, and I was going to confer with you on it. Tuesday night is when he brought it up. So I'll get to my notes and talk to you offline about that. It's just an assessment we continue to get that's unique to our community, but we're getting it even though we don't meet the criteria that the assessment was created for.
So with that, I'll definitely look into that, and I will follow up, with MWRA and find out what the whole parameters are about it and get a more definitive answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
And you better follow up because he was an officer of the Marine Corps.
Absolutely.
He'll come find you.
So is my dad.
Hoorah. Okay, can we talk about water now?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. We're talking about PFAS, and we have a 300, well, we just talked, Mr. Coulter talked about maybe with the new regime, new administration coming in, maybe things might change with EPA and other regulations. We'll see what happens on that. So we have a $300,000 design for Goddard. We already in construction with Muddy Pond and Pratt's Court. All right, they're already in progress, right? They're not finished. Is that correct?
Correct. They're under construction right now.
So what's the difference between Muddy Pond, Pratt's Court that will be different with Goddard's design? Do we have to spend $300,000 for a design that we already have between Pratt's Court and Muddy Pond? I don't think there's that much difference in the design, both of those, that we can't use that for the Goddard.
It's a total different system. I shouldn't say system, but it's a smaller well over in Goddard. Each building, you have to submit a design plan. It's just like building a house. You can't just use the specs off of one house, to do another one. It's the way the pumps work in there. Goddard is a much smaller well system, and Goddard is actually the highest PFAS of all the wells that we have. In the projected construction costs for the upgrade on the Goddard station is $1.5 million, but I wouldn't even be looking for that money, in this next fiscal year, because we're not going to be ready for it, and we have to get these other two stations up and done. It's just too much work going on at the same time. It just wouldn't be feasible for the town to try and do it.
Okay. So after January, if EPA regulations go down, we may not have to spend $300,000.
If the president-elect
If it goes, the PFAS scale goes higher than what it is right now, I think it's like 4 parts per
correct,
million or something.
4 parts per trillion.
Per trillion, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
So, I'm just throwing it out because, I don't want the town spending money if they don't have to.
Oh,
on
absolutely.
design, 'cause
If
it seems
the
like everything we
regulators-
do here is design, and we have things already in place that maybe downscale it. I don't know. We got contractors that know how to do this. I don't understand why you have to do design. But anyways, that's my little spiel on that. But I don't know if I can get into this, but I would like to.
Please do.
It has to do with meters, water meters.
Yes.
Okay. I've had quite a few people, and I brought this up before also. It's probably not the appropriate time to do it, but if I'm out of order, please say I'm out of order. It has to do with irrigation systems in your home, watering your garden, washing your car if you want to, if you don't go to Prestige or whatever. Every time we water, I have a lot of people that have gardens in my neighborhood, and I also. And it seems unfair that we're watering outside and that water is being charged on the sewer end. Now, I did some research, and there are towns and cities that do have what they call agricultural meters. The homeowner pays for the meter, they pay for the installation, and I'm sure that the water department can hook up the same thing they do for the water meters that we have now. It can't be interchangeable. You can't take it off and put it on your home meter, that goes to the sewer. But it's just another meter that the customer, the homeowner, pays for that they can use outside without having to pay the twice as much for the water for sewage, which is crazy to me. But, so if I have what do you call those, rain barrels? I have 2 rain barrels that I water my flowers and stuff, that most of my garden, but my garden's kind of big, and it's kind of short back and forth with, 5-gallon buckets of water. It's kind of difficult. Plus, when you got a $5,000 irrigation system, you like to use it, maintain your lawn. But I found that this past year, I just hooked up the sewer a couple of years ago with but now that I found that I can't use it as much as I like to because of the sewer rate. So I just like to know if we can look into that. If you need more information, I can get some more for you.
Yeah. I've worked in communities that have a lot of irrigation needs, so I totally understand totally understand your thoughts. We're trying to protect our resources, and it's DEP, EPA. It's all about water conservation. People with their gardens totally respect that, but that could be something that could be proposed to the water commissioners, which are the board. Right now it's their policy that's been in place that they don't allow irrigation meters, and it's something that could be considered.
Right. I know a lot of people that have irrigation have wells. Unfortunately, I tried putting a well in and I couldn't because I have too much ledge, and it would have been cost prohibitive to do it. So I'm just, I'm just throwing it out there. Hopefully, we can do something about it, and not for me, but for other residents in town that like to have gardens and keep their yard looking nice.
We're going to have, we're required by statute to have water commissioners rate hearing. Now, everyone knows now we're going to recommend a zero increase. But maybe we should put that on the agenda for discussion since it's going to be a water rate hearing anyway. Chad, I'd be happy to put that on the agenda.
I appreciate it, and thank you for your time. Sorry it took so long.
Oh, please don't apologize.
you.
That's why we're here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lauren, before you came in, we did announce there'll be no rate increase. And the main theme of what we talked about was in the sewer department, I think I have that right. In the sewer department, we're projecting a retained earnings year end this year of about $700,000. And that our goal is to offset or to reduce the amount of the capital budget for sewer that is paid for with borrowed money. And we get into a discussion on I&I. It was probably a bad example because we get money, low interest loans and grants from MWRA for I&I. But even if it's a jet truck for $400,000, we're trying to minimize the amount of assets that we're required to purchase or we need to purchase with debt. So it's good news. The plan has worked. Sewer has built up its retained earnings. Water has retained earnings, but the water department has more no interest loan programs available to us than the sewer. So if we're going to have retained earnings, we want to have them in the sewer department, and that's exactly the way it worked out. So the plan has worked. So I can go through the financials with you another time, but we went through the financials, and I know you're interested in it, so I'll be happy to sit down with you anytime you'd like. Cynthia. Oh, well, I knew you'd be here. Go ahead, Cynthia.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. While we're speculating about what can happen to PFAS, we have to recall remember that a third of the Senate has to run for re-election in 2 years. The entire House of Representatives every single one has to run for re-election. And I think the last thing that any politician wants to do is stand in front of a crowd and defend allowing cancer-causing chemicals to remain in the water supply, no matter who's in office. And remember, that's only 4 years too, and this individual can't run for re-election. So I think, like a lot of things in Massachusetts, we're in front of what's happening, and it's expensive, but I'm a cancer survivor, and that costs a lot of money too, chemo and radiation. I didn't pay that because I'm a retired teacher. The state of Massachusetts paid for all of that treatment. So whether we protect our water system or then have to treat all the people that become sick because of bad water, we're not going to win. It's not going to balance out because cancer treatment for millions is going to cost way more than than taking the chemical out of the Stoughton water supply.
Cynthia, I think you're 100% right. As a matter of public policy, the public has been educated as to what PFAS is and the danger of PFAS. Do I think the regulators went too far at 4 parts per trillion? Perhaps. But I don't think we're going to be able to put the genie back in the bottle on getting PFAS out of the water supply. Again, there's enough public education, public information that I think that at least the state of Massachusetts will move forward. Any other questions for you, Lauren? Is there anybody online? And if so, do you have any questions? Thank you. Is there anybody? All right. Well, folks, I think when you announce early on there's no rate increase, you can be very efficient with the public hearing. So I thank you all for coming. You're three dedicated souls. Thank you so much. And thank you for those of the public who either have this evening or will in the future watch on SMAC this hearing. I believe information is so important to public discourse. And as we saw from last night, we had over 100 comments to a post which was full of misinformation, and it created havoc. So I thank those of you who become well informed and can engage in this type of civil discourse. Thank you so much.